Ladies and gentlemen, beloved souls, there comes a moment in every destiny-driven life where separation becomes sacred. It doesn't always come with explanation. It rarely comes with comfort. But one thing is certain, it comes with purpose. You've just been separated from someone who made life about them, who fed on your strength and called it love. But I came to tell you today, God didn't just deliver you, He promoted you. This isn't the time to mourn what was lost. This is the time to rise into who you were always meant to become. When separation comes, especially from someone who once consumed so much of your heart and energy, it's easy to confuse it with loss. But what we often fail to recognize is that God uses separation as a signal. It's not a random emotional shift. It's a divine alert that something greater is about to be birthed in your life. God doesn't separate just for relief. He separates for revelation. He is trying to show you something about yourself, about your destiny, about your identity. When God removes someone, especially someone as deceptive and draining as a narcissist, it's not because He's trying to punish you. It's because He's trying to position you. You must understand that purpose is not revealed in comfort zones. Destiny doesn't grow in dysfunction, and identity cannot fully emerge in the presence of someone who constantly tries to erase it. The narcissist in your life was not just difficult. They were sent to distort your vision, weaken your strength, and challenge your truth. And the moment you began to awaken to who you really are, God saw it fit to remove the obstruction. What felt like heartbreak was heaven's way of clearing your path. What felt like rejection was actually your protection. It was never about the pain of letting go. It was always about the power of what's ahead. There's a spiritual principle at play here. God will never elevate you into new territory with the wrong people in your circle. He will not bless your next while you're still clinging to the past. When God separated you, He wasn't asking for your opinion. He was answering your prayer. Maybe not the prayer you spoke out loud, but the one you cried silently while lying awake, wondering how much more you could endure. You may not have had the strength to walk away, so God stepped in and created a divine disruption. And don't misinterpret the silence that follows. Separation is often quiet because God wants to teach you how to hear His voice without distraction. You're not abandoned, you're being aligned. You're not forsaken, you're being formed. And part of this formation requires isolation, not to punish you, but to preserve what He's building in you. Because as long as that narcissistic influence was present, you couldn't fully hear your own thoughts. You couldn't distinguish between what was manipulation and what was revelation. You couldn't see your own beauty because you were constantly questioning your worth. Now that you're separated, don't crave what you were delivered from. Don't long for what was actually limiting you. God is not interested in returning you to broken patterns. He's calling you into clarity, into truth, into identity. This is your time to grow, to stretch, to reclaim your spiritual authority. That separation is your sign. It's God's way of saying, I'm preparing you for something that can't be mixed with what once wounded you. Separation is sacred because it creates space for transformation. You couldn't evolve under the shadow of that narcissist. You couldn't breathe deeply in a space that kept you emotionally suffocated. Now that you've been separated, you can hear the still small voice of God again. You can dream without second-guessing yourself. You can walk into a room without shrinking. This is what God intended all along. But it took separation to get your attention. It took disconnection to bring you into direction. God is very intentional. He doesn't subtract unless He's about to multiply. He doesn't isolate unless He's about to elevate. The very fact that He removes someone so rooted in deception is proof that He is serious about your future. It means He values your mind, your spirit, your peace. And now it's your responsibility to value what He values. That means resisting the urge to return. That means not entertaining what you've been released from. That means understanding that this separation is not a sad ending. It's a sacred beginning. So change your perspective. Stop viewing this as a tragedy and start recognizing it as a transition. You didn't lose, God launched you. You weren't abandoned, you were anointed for a new beginning. The separation is a sign that the warfare is ending, a sign that the fog is lifting, a sign that your voice is coming back, a sign that your future is no longer on hold. The real question is not why they left, but why you stayed so long. The deeper question is not why the door closed, but what God was trying to open. And now that you're standing in the quiet of separation, realize it's not emptiness, it's opportunity. Opportunity to rebuild, to relearn, to reestablish who you are and what you deserve. God is not just moving people, He's moving you into alignment. And that is a sign you're finally on the right path. Don't fight the separation. Embrace the shift. God doesn't separate without strategy. This is your sign, not your setback. When a narcissist enters your life, they do not come merely as a person. They come as a storm cloaked in charm. Their presence seems captivating at first, almost magnetic. But over time, the gravity they create around themselves begins to pull you off course. You start to misplace your focus. You begin to shift your identity. And slowly, without even realizing it, you lose sight of the very assignment God placed on your life. Narcissists do not only cause emotional wounds, they create spiritual distraction. And that's why God had to separate you. Because while you were trying to fix them, your purpose was bleeding out in silence. A narcissist's most subtle weapon is not rage, manipulation, or gaslighting. It's the way they slowly cause you to compromise your convictions in the name of keeping the peace. You start to settle for less because arguing feels exhausting. You start to silence your voice because keeping them calm feels more important than speaking your truth. You begin to second guess what God told you because they keep convincing you that your vision is foolish, too much, unrealistic, or inconvenient. That's not love. That's bondage in disguise. God's assignment on your life requires clarity, and narcissists are masters of confusion. They will have you doubting your instincts, questioning your decisions, and burying your spiritual discernment under layers of emotional exhaustion. They keep you in a loop. One day you're enough, the next day you're too much. One day they need you, the next day they neglect you. And all of this drama becomes noise, noise that drowns out the whisper of God, noise that blinds you to your calling, noise that keeps you tied up in cycles that look like relationships but feel like cages. It's hard to hear God clearly when someone else is always narrating your life from their own broken lens. It's hard to focus on divine instruction when you're always walking on eggshells, trying not to trigger someone who refuses to heal. A narcissist's chaos demands your attention, and attention is currency in the kingdom. Whatever you focus on grows. So while you're focusing on their moods, their needs, their tantrums, and their ever-changing love, your purpose begins to atrophy. It gets buried under the emotional labor of managing someone else's insecurity. That's why God doesn't just ask you to walk away, He orchestrates your exit. He knows that if you stay too long, your spiritual vision will become impaired. You'll start thinking their behavior is normal. You'll begin justifying the disrespect. You'll confuse pain with passion and dysfunction with destiny. So God steps in, sometimes through exposure, sometimes through conflict, sometimes through silence that feels like abandonment, but is actually protection. Because God would rather see you cry alone in clarity than smile in delusion while your purpose dies slowly. You can't fulfill a divine calling while dancing around someone's ego. You cannot serve both the altar of truth and the throne of manipulation. One will always require the death of the other. And God didn't bring you this far for you to bow at the feet of someone who only loves you when you're weak. He anointed you for dominion, not dependency. And dominion requires focus. It requires the type of spiritual eyesight that cannot be clouded by emotional games and manipulation. The narcissist in your life may have had access to your emotions, but they never had access to your assignment. They couldn't see what God placed inside of you, and that's why they tried to belittle it. People mock what they don't understand. And because your purpose intimidated them, they tried to dim it. They tried to box it in. They tried to reduce you to who you were, so you'd never grow into who you were becoming. But here's the truth. When God separates, He sanctifies. That separation isn't about rejection. It's about realignment. It's about bringing your focus back to center. It's about unclouding your spiritual senses so you can hear God with precision again. Because your next steps are too critical to be taken in confusion. Your next level is too important to be approached in emotional compromise. God needs you focused. He needs you clear. He needs your heart quiet enough to receive instruction and your mind stable enough to follow through. So understand, when God pulled you away, he wasn't being cruel. He was calling you back to focus, back to vision, back to clarity, back to him. The narcissist in your life may have been loud, captivating, and emotionally addictive, but they were never part of your divine strategy. They were a detour, a lesson, a moment, but not the mission. Now that you're free, guard your focus. Protect your peace. Honor the separation. Because what God is about to reveal in you next, only clarity can carry. When God separates you from a narcissist, he's not only removing their presence, he's removing the cycle they kept you trapped in. And cycles don't break just because you walk away. They break when you refuse to entertain the things that broke you in the first place. That's the real challenge, not just leaving, but resisting the urge to return. Because even after the storm passes, even after the narcissist is no longer standing next to you, the real temptation shows up to answer the call, to check the message, to replay the good moments in your mind, and convince yourself that it wasn't as bad as it really was. That's how spiritual erosion begins, not in loud decisions, but in quiet compromises. And what you keep entertaining, God will not heal. You can't ask God for peace while keeping your door open to chaos. You can't pray for clarity while inviting confusion into your inbox. God is not obligated to deliver you from something you refuse to release. That's why he allows separation to come with silence. Sometimes he lets their voice go quiet so you can finally hear his voice clearly. Because until that toxic voice is gone, it competes with divine instruction. And what competes with God must be confronted. The narcissist knew how to manipulate your hope, twist your compassion, and dress abuse in the language of romance. And every time you went back, you weren't just risking your peace. You were trading in your spiritual growth. There is a principle in healing that most don't understand. Healing is not just about what God does in you. It's about what you stop allowing around you. You can't bind spirits on Sunday and text them on Monday. You can't fast for clarity and feed your soul confusion. Emotional detox takes discipline. Spiritual maturity requires boundaries. If God is going to build something strong in you, he has to remove everything that weakens you. And narcissists are experts at weakening people from the inside out. Not with fists, but with words. Not with threats, but with gaslighting. They tear down your trust in yourself until you're so broken you call captivity comfort. But God saw it. He saw how every time you second-guessed yourself, it was because someone else trained you to ignore your discernment. He watched as you bent yourself to fit into someone's emptiness. And in his mercy, he pulled you out. But he will not pull you forward while you're still looking back. You cannot carry dysfunction into deliverance and expect freedom to work. That's not how the kingdom operates. If you truly want restoration, you must walk in agreement with God's decision. And God's decision is separation. Every time you choose to re-engage with a narcissist, you are telling heaven, I prefer my plan over yours. That's not humility, that's rebellion. God doesn't just care about your heart, he cares about your alignment. He cares about what has access to your spirit, your mind, your emotions. You don't just need to block them on your phone. You need to block the parts of your soul that still believe they're your solution. You need to break the soul tie that keeps lying to you, telling you maybe they've changed, when all that's really changed is the silence between you. You've prayed too hard to go back to what God already closed. You've cried too long to undo what he has healed. Healing requires agreement. Restoration requires trust. And the moment you begin entertaining the narcissist again, you're telling God that his idea of peace is not enough. But it is enough. It has always been enough. You were never created to live in cycles of apology without change, affection without commitment, or presence without purpose. That is not divine love, that is distraction. And distraction is dangerous when you're on the edge of destiny. That's why the enemy sends narcissists, not because you're weak, but because you're about to wake up. He sends counterfeits to drain you before the real promise comes. He sends charm to confuse you before truth arrives. And if he can't stop you from leaving, he'll try to pull you back with memories, fantasies, and false apologies. But don't take the bait. You've already seen the fruit. You already know the pattern. You don't need closure, you need conviction. So let God complete the healing by refusing to open doors He shut. Don't rehearse the trauma. Don't resurrect what He buried. Let peace do what it came to do, restore you. Let separation finish its assignment. Let silence be your protection. Because healing doesn't just happen in prayer, it happens in obedience. And sometimes the most spiritual thing you can do is say no, block the number, delete the message, and move forward with a heart that trusts the one who saved you. They were only assigned to your story for a season, not your destiny. You have to understand the power of divine timing and seasonal purpose. In life, some people walk in not to stay, but to serve a function. Their entrance into your life was not permanent. It was strategic. You see, God in His infinite wisdom allows certain people into your path, not because you need them forever, but because you need to learn something for your next. A narcissist's role was never eternal. It was educational. And if you're not careful, you'll start confusing emotional history with spiritual destiny. Just because you've shared time, tears, and trials with someone doesn't mean they're qualified to walk with you into the next dimension of your calling. That's where many people fall. They mistake length of time for depth of connection. They assume that because someone has been around for years, they are meant to be around for life. But seasonal people have expiration dates. Their behavior, their dysfunction, and even the chaos they bring is often a divine signal that their time in your life is up. And if you ignore those signals, you extend what God intended to end. That's how blessings become burdens. That's how promises become prisons. The narcissist wasn't designed to carry your destiny. Their hands are too selfish, their motives too corrupted, their heart too hard. They don't have the character to support your next chapter. So when God removed them, He wasn't being cruel, He was being merciful. He was preventing long-term damage by cutting off temporary distractions. He was preserving your legacy by uprooting what could have poisoned your future. When you see that level of love from heaven, you stop mourning who left and start celebrating who you're becoming. They were loud in your life, but not loyal. They were present, but never truly invested. They were physically near, but spiritually absent. That's the nature of a narcissist. They come into your life wearing the costume of a companion, but carry the heart of a consumer. They don't love you, they feed off you. They don't nurture your soul, they drain it. And yet for a season, God allowed it, not to punish you, but to position you. Sometimes it takes dealing with a narcissist to see your own strength. It takes betrayal to teach you boundaries. It takes emotional exhaustion to birth spiritual awareness. That season taught you what peace feels like by showing you what chaos looks like. It revealed how valuable your energy is by letting you watch it be wasted on someone who could never reciprocate. You learned what real love is by enduring a counterfeit, and that knowledge is priceless. But the season has served its purpose. The lesson is over. The test is complete. Now comes the promotion, but only if you don't go back. Your destiny cannot be fulfilled with dead weight attached to it. There's a reason rockets shed parts as they rise. What helped you launch can't always help you land. Narcissists may have played a role in your rise, in your awakening, in your spiritual growth, but that role has ended. They are not equipped to walk with you into the land of purpose, because they are not builders, they are breakers. They dismantle dreams, distort identity, and devour peace. God saw the future, and He said no more. You're on a journey now that requires clean vision, quiet spirit, and clear discernment. And the narcissist clutters all three. Their presence is like fog on a windshield. It may not break the glass, but it blinds the driver. You can't afford blindness in this season. You can't afford distractions in this chapter. This is the part of your life where precision matters, where alignment matters, where agreement matters. And narcissists can't agree with what they don't understand. And they never understood your calling, your value, or your mission. So don't make the mistake of trying to turn a temporary assignment into a permanent partnership. Don't force what God has already finished. Don't try to resurrect what heaven has buried. When God separates, He sanctifies. He's not just removing someone from your life. He's making room for something greater. For people who will love without manipulation. For connections that won't require you to shrink. For relationships that nurture, not drain. That's your portion now. That's your promise. And to receive it, you have to let go of what you were never meant to keep. You were chosen. That's what you must understand. Before the betrayal, before the manipulation, before the tears, you were chosen. Not because you were perfect, but because you were purposed. And when God places purpose on a person's life, that life will go through pressure. It's inevitable. The pain is never random. The people who walk in and out of your life aren't just there by accident. Some of them are allowed access not to bless you, but to reveal you. That narcissist, the one who played with your emotions, distorted your perception of love and turned your kindness into a battlefield. They were not sent to destroy you. They were allowed to expose the fight inside of you. The enemy thought if he could send someone charming enough, confusing enough, and damaging enough, you would forfeit your calling and question your value. But what he didn't calculate was that the pain would activate a deeper hunger in you. A hunger for truth, for clarity, for purpose. See, when you're chosen, tests don't come in the form of problems alone. They often come in the form of people. People who dress like blessings but are really assignments. People who speak like destiny partners but operate like distractions. That narcissist was not a partner. They were a mirror that reflected what you had to confront. Your boundaries, your beliefs, your brokenness. God used them as a tool. Yes, a tool, not a gift, not a soulmate, not a forever. Just a tool in the master's hand to refine something deep inside of you. And here's where the shift begins. When you start realizing they were the fire that brought your gold to the surface. Without their manipulation, you wouldn't have learned discernment. Without their betrayal, you wouldn't have learned to listen to God over your emotions. Without their absence, you wouldn't have discovered the value of your presence. That's what being chosen means. Your lessons are deeper, your tests are heavier, but your rewards are greater. When God chooses you, he prepares you, and that preparation is never painless. You thought you were being punished when the narcissist drained you, but in reality you were being positioned. Every tear watered the soil for a harvest you didn't see coming. Every sleepless night was heaven's way of shaking you into your next season. Every false apology, every manipulation tactic, every silent treatment, they weren't meant to break you. They were meant to build something in you that could never be shaken again. You started out wanting love, connection, partnership. God knew you needed identity, strength, and vision first. So he let you walk through the fire, not to burn you, but to brand you. He marked you in private so that when he elevates you in public, you'll carry the weight of wisdom, not just experience. Because when you're chosen, your scars become sermons and your wounds become wisdom. Let this sink in. The narcissist didn't ruin you. They revealed you. They couldn't take your light. They only exposed how bright it really was. The enemy's plan was to confuse your mind, distort your identity, and get you addicted to dysfunction so you would miss your destiny. But God said, not this one. This one is mine. And he pulled you out even when you didn't want to leave. He shut doors you kept knocking on. He closed hearts you kept trying to open. Because he knew if you stayed any longer, you would shrink. You would settle. You would silence the very voice he anointed. Don't despise the process. Don't curse the memory. Don't try to erase the season. Instead, extract the treasure. Ask yourself, what did I learn? What did I outgrow? What did I discover about myself that I would have never known had I not walked through that valley? Because now you know your worth is not negotiable. Your peace is not optional. Your presence is not for everyone. And your purpose is no longer on pause. That's what happens when the chosen are tested. They emerge wiser, sharper, bolder. The narcissist was a test and you passed. Not because you didn't cry, but because you didn't quit. Not because you didn't get hurt, but because you didn't stay broken. You rose. And in that rising, you made heaven proud and hell nervous. Going back to what God has removed you from is more than just a poor decision. It is an act of mistrust. It is a silent statement to heaven that says, I know better. When God separates you from a narcissist, he is not making a suggestion. He is issuing a divine instruction. To return to what was toxic is to declare that God's wisdom is negotiable. And that is dangerous territory for any soul called to purpose. You must understand this truth. When God steps into your story to remove someone, he is revealing the hidden damage they caused that you could no longer detect. You had become so familiar with dysfunction that you began calling it normal. You adjusted your walk to fit their shadows. You lowered your voice to match their silence. You dimmed your light so they wouldn't feel outshined. But God saw it all and said, no more. When God delivers you, he expects you to walk in that freedom with trust, not hesitation. Because freedom is not just escape, it's an assignment. It means you have a role to play in your own restoration. And part of that role is refusing to rebuild what God destroyed. The narcissist was not your covering. They were your ceiling. You could never rise above the limits they subtly placed on your soul. And now, having been set free, why would you willingly return to what kept you small? There is a dangerous lie the enemy whispers after a separation. He says things like, maybe they've changed. Maybe you were too harsh. Maybe you misunderstood. But let's be clear, he's not trying to restore a relationship. He's trying to reverse your deliverance. The enemy wants you bound to cycles, not committed to progress. He wants you sentimental, not strategic. He wants you attached to memories, not anchored in revelation. You didn't just walk away, you were extracted. You were rescued. The divine hand of God reached into the pit and pulled you out. To go back is not just to dishonor yourself, it is to reject divine rescue. And when you do that, the consequences are costly. Because returning to what God freed you from can close the door to what he wants to give you next. Your destiny is unlocked by your decisions. And nothing delays purpose like disobedience. Trust requires you to believe that what you cannot see is still better than what you left behind. It demands that you believe God is protecting something sacred inside of you. He saw that the longer you stayed, the more you'd lose yourself. He saw that your calling was being choked by control, your peace being replaced with anxiety, your joy being negotiated daily. And he stepped in, not because you cried loud enough, but because your purpose was valuable enough. Some people only see the surface of the relationship. They say, but you look so happy, or they treated you well in public. But God never judges by appearances. He sees the soul. He sees what happens behind closed doors, in the secret conversations, in the manipulation wrapped in compliments. He sees how your spirit was breaking while your mouth was smiling. And he knows that staying in a place like that too long creates spiritual amnesia. You forget who you were before the abuse. So when God separates you, he does so to awaken your identity again. And to go back is to silence that awakening. It is to fall asleep in the same nightmare, hoping for a different dream. But dreams don't change unless the dreamer wakes up. And you, beloved, have been awakened. You see now, you know now, you feel again, you breathe again. That's not just healing, that's heaven's fingerprint on your life. The narcissist may reach out. They may apologize. They may cry. They may even act like they've changed. But remember, change without accountability is just a performance. Narcissists don't return to make things right. They return to make things familiar. Familiar is not always fruitful. Sometimes it's fatal. It kills your growth, your voice, your confidence, your ability to trust yourself. Don't fall for the mirage of maybe. Maybe is a trap when you already have a word from God that says move forward. Going back means you have more faith in their potential than God's promise. And that imbalance is what God removed to begin with. He wanted your loyalty returned to him. He wanted your dependency shifted, because no one should ever sit on a throne in your life higher than the one who created it. Your loyalty to someone who wounded you was never noble. It was bondage. And God delivered you not just to save you, but to teach you to stop saving them. Let your no be final. Let your boundary be firm. Let your freedom be loud. You didn't lose anything. You were preserved. You didn't miss a chance. You were given one. You didn't fall behind. You were realigned. Trust what God removed. Trust who God exposed. And trust where God is leading you. Because every time you say no to going back, heaven says yes to taking you higher. Peace is not just a feeling. It is not just the absence of conflict or noise. Peace is a spiritual indicator. It is heaven's stamp of approval. When God is involved in something, peace will always be present. That doesn't mean the situation will be easy. That doesn't mean there won't be storms. But even in the storm, there will be an inner stillness, a quiet assurance, a sense that you are exactly where you are supposed to be. This is why you must understand the difference between peace and chemistry. Because narcissists are masters of connection. They are skilled at creating an emotional bond. They know how to mirror your dreams, imitate your values, and present a version of themselves that feels like destiny. But what they cannot manufacture is divine peace. Chemistry will make your heart race, but peace will make your soul rest. Chemistry may excite your emotions, but peace will nourish your purpose. Narcissists can build intense moments. They can sweep you off your feet, speak your language, and make promises that sound like prophecy. But all of it is a performance. And once the performance ends, you're left confused, questioning your worth, doubting your discernment. That's because it wasn't peace. It was manipulation wrapped in affection. It was illusion dressed as intimacy. And when God wants to grow you, he starts by replacing emotional roller coasters with spiritual clarity. You don't need to chase feelings anymore. You don't need to force alignment. You don't need to justify red flags. If peace is not present, God is not in it. Because peace does not just accompany God's will, peace confirms it. You may have had laughter with them. You may have had passion. You may have even had plans. But did you ever have peace? Did you truly feel secure in who you were becoming? Or did you constantly shrink to avoid conflict? Did you find yourself apologizing just to keep the connection alive? That's not peace. That's survival. And God never called you to survive in love. He called you to thrive in it. There's a reason why your soul was tired even when your heart was invested. There's a reason you prayed for clarity and then the relationship began to unravel. That wasn't coincidence, that was confirmation. God will disturb the counterfeit to make room for the genuine. He will shake foundations that were built on charm instead of truth. And he will remove anyone who brings confusion because God is not the author of confusion. Peace is how heaven whispers, this is safe. Peace is how the Holy Spirit says, you can rest here. Peace is how God validates alignment. And that is what the narcissist could never give you. They could give you attention, but never assurance. They could give you moments, but never stability. They could give you control, but never covering. You are constantly guessing, constantly explaining, constantly doubting your own instincts. That's not how God designed relationships to function. Love that comes from God does not torment. It does not destabilize. It does not demand you betray yourself just to be accepted. Love from God carries peace. Even in correction, there is calm. Even in challenge, there is respect. Even in silence, there is understanding. The moment you let go of chemistry and start chasing peace, everything begins to change. You stop begging people to stay. You stop tolerating disrespect in the name of connection. You stop mistaking intensity for intimacy. And you start choosing the environments, the relationships, the assignments, and the spaces that speak to your soul, not just your emotions. Emotions are temporary. They rise and fall like the tide. But peace is rooted in the eternal. Peace anchors you. Peace affirms that you are seen by God and safe in his plan. If the only time you felt calm was when they were in a good mood, that was not peace. That was conditional mercy. If you had to compromise your identity just to maintain the relationship, you were sacrificing your peace. But now God has pulled you out. He has cleared the noise. He has silenced the drama. And in the quiet, you're going to find something you hadn't felt in a long time yourself. Your healed self. Your growing self. Your joyful self. That's peace. It's not loud. It's not boastful. But it is strong. It doesn't entertain chaos. It doesn't entertain manipulation. It doesn't entertain people who only show up when they need something. You were born to live in peace. That doesn't mean your life will be without challenges. It means that even in difficulty, you will carry a calm that cannot be shaken. That's what God is doing now. He is rebuilding your foundation on peace, not pressure. On truth, not trauma. On love, not lies. And every time you feel tempted to go back to what broke you, ask yourself one question. Did it ever give you peace? Not passion, not excitement, not butterflies, but peace. Peace is God's voice without words. And now that he's separated you from what drained you, that peace will grow louder. It will guide your decisions. It will shape your boundaries. It will protect your purpose. So choose peace and never trade it again for chemistry that costs your clarity. God is leading you somewhere new, and peace is your compass. Follow it. When God is preparing to elevate you to your next level, the first thing he does is clean your environment. He clears out the noise, the confusion, the chaos, and yes, sometimes the people. You see, the presence of certain individuals in your life doesn't just delay your journey, it contaminates the atmosphere required for your transformation. The next level God has for you is not just about position, it's about purity. It's not just about what you do, it's about who you become. And becoming who you're meant to be requires an environment where your spirit can breathe, your mind can grow, and your heart can heal. A narcissist brings a toxic residue into your life. Their manipulation creates a fog that keeps you guessing your worth. Their charm entices your loyalty, but their actions betray your trust. The more you try to maintain peace, the more you're disturbed internally. That's not a clean environment. That's emotional pollution. And God in his mercy decided to clear the air before he poured out the promise. What many don't realize is that divine separation is often the preparation for divine expansion. God cannot place his glory in a space that is still occupied by dysfunction. He cannot fill you with vision while your soul is cluttered with confusion. That's why he removed what was draining you, because where he's taking you, you need full capacity. You need clarity. You need room to hear his voice without interference. And narcissistic presence is nothing but interference. You were praying for breakthrough, for answers, for acceleration, but those things require alignment. God is not going to build on unstable ground. He's not going to bless you in an environment where he has to compete for your attention. The narcissists made themselves the center of your world. But God says, I must be first. And when he's ready to be first, he will move whatever is second, third, or even deeply rooted in your emotions so that he can establish order. Going back to that environment after God has cleansed it is like sweeping a dirty floor and then walking over it with muddy boots. It undoes the work. It invites the old problems back with new strength. That's why some people go back and find it's worse than before. Because when you resist divine cleansing, you invite deeper chaos. And your spirit knows it. That's why you can't find peace. That's why your sleep is disturbed. That's why your confidence fades. Because something inside of you understands you were not meant to return. You were meant to rise. This separation is God protecting the oil on your life. The calling you carry, the anointing on your name, the assignment you were born for, is too valuable to be mixed with emotional abuse. The environment for destiny must be guarded, not shared with those who manipulate it. The moment you entertain what God has evicted, you start contaminating what he consecrated. The promise of God cannot flourish in contaminated soil. And let's be honest, some of the tears you cried didn't come from loss. They came from the realization that you compromised your peace, trying to keep someone who was never meant to stay. You silenced your voice. You questioned your identity. You tolerated less because you believed you had to. But God in his great mercy showed you that you didn't. He showed you that you could stand again. He showed you that you could smile again. And most of all, he showed you that you could heal. Now is not the time to retreat. Now is the time to rebuild. Let the silence of separation become the sanctuary where you hear his instruction clearly. Let the absence of manipulation become the space where your creativity flows again. Let the void left by the narcissist become the womb where your new strength is born. You are not alone. You are being realigned. You are not abandoned. You are being advanced. Everything God has for you next requires this version of you: focused, healed, clean, and unapologetically obedient. The cost of going back is too high. The damage too deep. The delay too long. Don't trade your future for familiar pain. Don't exchange divine order for emotional addiction. What God is doing now in your life cannot be stopped unless you stop it by walking back into what he already removed. So stand firm. The environment has been cleared. The air is clean. The stage is set. Don't bring the past into the room where your future is waiting.